You're live, Chairman. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to this PG&A committee meeting held on the 17th of July in the Chambers. My name is Councillor Wendy Stamp and I'm the chairperson of this committee. Members, we are streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting, you are given your consent to being recorded. During each item, please put your hand up to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Could I ask members to avoid approaching the top table, as this could create interference with the cameras and the live stream. Please note that the YouTube live stream sound recording is dependent on the correct use of the microphones. Therefore, can I ask that when invited to speak, you remember to turn on your microphone and turn it off when you've finished, please. Make sure you reference a page or paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers, and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible, please, members. We do not have a fire alarm testing scheduled for today. However, we may have periodic fire alarms, and I remind members to ensure they sign in and out when entering the council offices. If you hear a fire alarm, please exit using either of the two marked fire escape routes. Once out of the building, please proceed to the designated muster point located on the grass verge by the police station entrance. I'd like to welcome all the directors and the officers in person. I think we've only got Miss Green in person, so I'd like to welcome you for being here. Thank you very much. I'd also like to introduce and welcome Emma. Is it Larcombe, Emma? Larcombe, and she is the, I think you're a director, aren't you, of KPMG, and she is our new, we've got two external auditors. There's Emma and
Priya is my manager.
Priya's not online, is she? She's just due today. So we'd like to welcome you to our committee and thank you for attending in person. And obviously those of you who've been in this committee a few times, we're used to Aaron Winter. He's BDO and he's our internal audit, but I'd still like to welcome you as well. Right, so you can see we've got a few substitutes tonight. So Tara, could I have the apologies for absence and the substitutes, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, apologies were received from Councillor Bassinger, Councillor Bowen, Councillor Burwood, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Pratt and Councillor Spenceley. Councillor Swindle is attending as a substitute for Councillor Burwood, Councillor Morgan as a substitute for Councillor Pratt, and Councillor Driver as a substitute for Councillor Spenceley. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank Councillor Driver because he's stepping in to help me tonight, because I don't use the computer, so he's keeping everything up to date and going to prompt me if I forget anything, which you regular members know I often do. Right, moving on to agenda item 3, the minutes. It is recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of June 2025, found on pages 5 to 14, are approved as a true and accurate record. I so moved. Do I have a seconder? Yes, thank you. Councillor McNeil has seconded that, Tara. Does any members wish to raise anything as a matter of accuracy? Please put your hands up if there is anything you want to challenge or... Right. So, members, can we take that and agree by assent, please? Agreed. Thank you, Tara. We've agreed that. Agenda item 4, members. Matters arising. Found on pages 15 to 16. Now, I'd like to... Has anybody got any questions about it first? Okay, Tara, this is just for noting. On the 5th of June, if we can just go through this slightly, can we have an update on the numbers of members who have now attended their GDPR training? Can that come to the next committee meeting, please?
Yeah, of course, Chairman.
Thank you, I'd like that. And also, Mr. Smith requested some information at the last meeting, or the June meeting. Did you receive the information you wanted, Mr. Smith? Because I think we were then going to meet again.
Yes, yes, I have received. I haven't had a chance to go through in detail, and there's one. Okay. Excuse me, one other piece I need, but that's down to me, not down to the speed in which it was given.
That's absolutely fine. I just wanted to make sure that it's not getting lost. It's important that we do deal with matters arising. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, members, do we agree the matters arising? Agreed. Thank you very much. We're going to now move on to declarations of interest. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests other registrable interests and non-registrable interests relating to items of business on the agenda regard to paragraph 9 and appendix B of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they are also required to disclose any such interest as soon as they become aware, should the need arise throughout the meeting. Members, do we have any declarations of interest, please? No, none, Tara. So we're going to move on to agenda item 6, public participation. I've been advised there's none. Is that still the same, Tara? No public participation?
Yes, Chairman, that's right. We haven't got any public participation, sorry.
PP. Okay, thank you. Right, let's go on to the items of business then, members. Agenda item 7, the plan for the audit of accounts for the financial year 2024 to 25, found on pages 17 to 56. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over for Ben to Mr. J to deliver the report, and then I will deliver the recommendations at the end after we've had questions and any answers. So, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. There's quite a lot of information in item 7. In large part, this is a very routine process, and I'll talk the committee through the report in a moment. Unfortunately, we're working in quite an unusual context, and I think there's quite a lot we could talk about, but I think we can sort of focus it down, hopefully, to some of the key areas that I think are of focus for the council. So just to talk you through the report as prepared, and Emma Larkham, obviously, as introduced by the Chair earlier, is here and will be able to answer questions specifically from the perspective of KPMG. So just to take you through what's going on, obviously, section 1 takes you through the purpose of the report, and I think this is an important point to note. It is a little bit tedious, it is a little bit boring, a little bit formulaic, but that's actually quite often a good way to do things. What happens is that in advance of the auditor, the external auditor, taking on the audit, they submit the plan to the council so that the council understands the process that will be undergone. An absolutely usual process that happens in councils up and down the country. That's set out particularly in sort of paragraphs 1.1 to 1.3. Section 2 sets out the recommendations, and as the Chair just mentioned, we'll come back to those shortly, but I think it references Appendix 1, importantly, and that's the document that's been submitted to us by KPMG, which sets out the external audit plan and strategy to consider the accounts from the 24-25 year, which are also subsequently on this same agenda at item 9, and we'll be picking those up in due course. In terms of the key issues, this is where the whole situation becomes quite complex. I would point members to the link included at paragraph 3.2, which is to the Financial Reporting Council fairly accessible guide into local audit backlogs. It's something that I picked up separately, and Emma also indicated this is something that councillors in other councils have found quite helpful. It's fairly jargon-free, it's fairly well explained, and it takes anybody who wants to read through the backgrounds to this through it in a reasonable amount of detail, and is done by an independent body who command quite a lot of respect in this area. The situation is, I've tried to outline it for the purpose of the committee and to put it on record through section 3.3 in terms of some of the issues that have been encountered in recent years by councils up and down the country in terms of the process of securing the external audit opinion on the financial statements. It's probably simplest, if I may, to point the committee to paragraph 3.3.8. Suffice to say, there is a quote there from the Public Accounts Committee of the House of Commons. Anything which is making its way to the Public Accounts Committee of the House of Commons isn't just a local issue in Maldon or in Essex, this is a national issue. I've included a quote there, and the link is also included for reference if any of the committee or anybody else reading the papers wishes to follow that up. But quite clearly there is a much bigger issue here, and it's something I think that I've come into this role quite recently. Emma has only recently been drafted into her complementary role within KPMG quite recently. Between the two of us and working with yourselves as councillors, we're hoping to get as much value for local residents as possible out of this process, but we are both walking into a context which is complex and difficult and something that which is not very much of our own making. That's a bit of a disclaimer, but it's not to say we're not taking responsibility for what we can do, and that's what we're going to be doing as we go through the process. In terms of the plan for the audit at 3.4.2, you can see an extract of the report also attached as an appendix, which sets out the process that Emma and her team have put together, through which we'll be going through the process of auditing the 24-25 accounts. I'm not going to comment on that in detail. I know that Emma will be able to come back and answer questions or take you through it shortly. In terms of the cost of some of this work, I've set out at paragraph 3.4.5, again repeating from the information that's been provided by KPMG, the cost that was incurred in the previous year and the likely cost in the current year. It is worth bearing in mind that there is a statutory audit fee, including VFM, that covers the normal defined range, if you like, the defined normal aspect of the audit. That's been included within the KPMG papers at the level of 158,000. Now that is a significant level of growth on prior years. There is detail to that. Emma's probably better placed to answer questions on that than I am, but I am cited on that and the reasons for it. And there is a degree of catching up on the level of the fee, which has been something which has been advertised within the sector by public sector audit appointments, who are the group responsible for the management of the external audit contractors and the contracts for external audit up and down the country. I was expecting that to be approximately double. It is approximately double. There isn't yet a fee variation amount included within that. Emma will be able to better advise the committee as to whether there will be a fee variation, and if so, what that's likely to be, based on current information, and what that will be for. My view is that we're likely to see probably a not dissimilar fee variation to what we've seen in previous years. So the current level of fee at 158,000 could be expected to go up to 200, 220,000 or so, depending on the outcome of the work which is required. So I think it's probably something which is worth trying to understand in terms of what that fee is payable for and what it is therefore that the council will be receiving in return. And this is a complicated area, and we'll do our best between Emma and myself to provide that information. 3.4.6 gives some context to that. So the audit fee, which has been reported in previous years through the accounts in the normal way, the fees for previous years are set out there. It's fairly clear that the overall fees have been seen to increase substantially in recent years, and I think that's probably set to continue, but we'll see where that gets to. So there is a conclusion there at 4.1, and I think it's really about inviting the committee to consider the wider context of challenges for the external audit process within the country as a whole, but also specifically how we want to respond to some of that in the context of the Maldon accounts. The sections at sections 5 and 6 are fairly generic. I've detailed some of the implications there. I would point the committee to the section 7, the related reports. There are a lot of related reports including there. So in 7.1, I've included the links to some of the previous reports brought to this committee by previous chief finance officers and auditors. And there's also some other reports in there, some of which, my apologies, they are quite detailed, but it does give a flavour, I hope, of the complexity of the situation that we're working within, but also the fact that this is an area of national focus through the Public Accounts Committee, as mentioned, but also through SIPFA, through the National Audit Office, through the work of Public Sector Audit Appointments, PSAA, and others. So the links are in there. So thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to talk the committee through that report. I'm happy to take any questions arising. Otherwise, I'm happy to hand across to Emma, who would be able to take us through the detail of what's already been provided by KPMG.
Lovely, thank you. Just a correction, members, I'm sure the eagle-eyed ones have spotted on page 19, 3.4, the accounts is 2024 to 25, not 24-15. So if we can just note that, please. And if Tara, you can note that we recognise that it was an error.
Of course,
Thank you very much. And I'd like to ask the committee members if you've read all the reports on 7.1 and 7.2, and if not, why not? I mean, come on, give us a chance. I mean, thank you very much. And I'm sure on a rainy day, I think we could maybe do a working group and read them. But no, thank you for that information. Right, Emma, I'd like to hand over to you because I think it would be only fair for you to go through it, because I've certainly got some questions, but I'll ask my questions after members have asked theirs. So if you could give a run through of your report, Appendix 1, and our papers, members, or just some headline news and answer some of the questions and points that Ben has raised for us, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for having me today.
Pleasure.
So what we've got today is our draft audit plan. So as Ben set out, this is essentially our look ahead to the work that we plan to do for this year as part of the audit. And it is a statutory requirement that I bring this to you today, but also I think it's really helpful for you to see where I consider there to be risk within the audit process. And obviously, as Ben has set out there in a lot of detail, there is a lot of complexities in terms of the audit process. But if I just, to start off with, just go through what I'm expecting to achieve in 24-25 and the work that we will be focusing in on, I think that's important, because whilst there is obviously national context to the status of audits nationally in terms of what we're going to do at Maldon in terms of getting the assurances that you need on the accounts, I think it's really important that we just spend a moment thinking about those risk areas. So in terms of my report, if I just take you through a couple of the key pages. So on page it's 28 of the full pack, or page 4 of my document, this just sets out our materiality for the year. So these are the levels through which we will sort of test balances within the accounts. So you'll see there the overarching materiality level is of 633,000, but we sort of test to a slightly lower level than that to make sure that we have overarching sort of aggregate assurance. So we will test balances above sort of £400,000, and we will report to you any errors we identify above that £31,600 there. So if we, when we're doing any testing, if we identify any errors, they're the things that we would be reporting back to you at that sort of de minimis level. Then if I just go through to where we have considered risk. So we have already, and I think it is important just in terms of status here, we have already done some work in terms of the Maldon councils for the 24-25 year end. So we've done a lot of our risk assessment, done a lot of our planning work. And my initial assessment on where we see the significant risks, so the areas of sort of heightened audit focus, are in relation to the valuation of land and buildings. There is estimation in any of those valuations, so in terms of how that valuation position is reached. So we are engaging with our own internal valuation specialists, and we will review that sort of methodology of which you've applied on your own valuation of those assets, and do some sample checking and make sure that we're comfortable in terms of that estimation assumptions that are used to get that balance sheet position in those regards. The second risk I've got there is around management override of controls. Now, this is a risk that we see on every single audit. So it's not that there is a heightened risk at Maldon, but it is one that we are required to look at. And this is really in recognition of the fact that, you know, management, if they so wanted to, have potential opportunities to override controls. And therefore, we make sure we do procedures to address that underlying risk. So that really is focusing on work around journals, looking at key estimations, key assumptions that are made by management in terms of any key judgment areas. And the last point there we've just got is the valuation of the pensions liability. And again, that is an area where there is estimation involved in terms of that figure. So at KPMG, we have a dedicated specialist pensions team who will do that work. And again, that has already started. And the last risk there, whilst not a significant risk, but is a difference for the 24-25 year end, is around the adoption of IFRS 16. So that is a new accounting standard that comes in for this year, is around the leases. So it's a change in a sort of a lease accounting. So again, because that is an area of difference and sort of newness for the sector, we will do specific procedures in relation to that risk and report back on all of those factors to you. The subsequent pages just sort of set out in more detail each of those risks and in terms of the key procedures that we are planning to perform. I think I will just pause there and say, obviously, this last year I recognise that you will have had a similar document which will have said that this was our ambition was to complete all of those tests. This year, as I stand here today, and assuming we get all of the information that we need from management, there is no reason why we won't be completing all of these tests on the 24-25 year end positions, so the in-year figures. I'll come back to where we are in terms of the opening positions, but my expectation is I will be able to report back to you on these procedures as far as possible at the end of the year. So then if I just go through to page... I'll just touch on value for money. So value for money, our approach is set out on page 41. So value for money is the other aspect of the audit that we deliver, which is sort of the non-financial aspect. So it's where we look at the arrangements in place in relation to your financial sustainability, your governance arrangements, and your ability to secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness. So sort of actually delivering that value for money, any savings. We are required to do a number of procedures in that area. Again, work has started. You did have a report around value for money last year. This year, that reporting will come to you slightly earlier. But we haven't yet completed all of that risk assessment work. But once that's done, I will bring that back to the next audit committee. And then if we just touch on page 44, that just sets out our audit timeline. So as you'll see there, we are currently sort of just concluding that risk assessment, doing our interim review at the moment, and the VFM risk assessment is in progress and will be concluded by the end of August in the main. And then our sort of more detailed year-end testing work is scheduled to commence throughout the summer, although we have actually started our sampling this week, so we are slightly ahead of schedule in that regard. We will bring, my anticipation is to bring sort of the October-November some draft audit findings to you. So at that point I'm expecting to have completed the vast majority of that detailed testing I've just gone through, and we will then use some time at the end of the year to start hopefully doing some rebuild and assurance work where we are able to and where we've got the full guidance through centrally to complete that, with the expectation then of obviously signing before the backstop date at the end of February. So whilst that is I suppose I understand that there are questions as to why we wouldn't necessarily sign earlier. The guidance in our view, in KPMG's views, precludes us from doing that because of the way that the LARIGs are written. But my expectation is to still provide the committee with assurances at the end of sort of October, November time to say, actually, we've delivered all of this work and therefore we can start doing the rebuilding work towards the end of the year, because we need to be showing that we are working to build as much assurance as possible by the backstop date. So hopefully that gives you some assurances that we are significantly further ahead than we were last year, but also with a clear plan of how to make sure that you do get some assurance on some of the balances this year. And then if I just flip over to page 45, so on fees, I will just try and address a couple of Ben's points there that he raised. So just to be clear, I don't set the audit fee. The audit fee is set by the PSAA. I have no control over what that audit fee is. So they are the audit fees that the PSAA sets and have considered reasonable for the statutory audit, including the value for money work that is required. That fee is for essentially delivering an in-year audit, so it doesn't include any work around rebuilding of assurance, so sort of recovering that disclaimer period that you have, and also is sort of based on the assumption that there are no significant value for money risks, that there are no funnies, no significant adjustments, no, no, Ben's team doesn't just not deliver anything to me and I sit and ask for it for months on end, none of which I'm expecting, by the way. So whilst Ben is saying that he is anticipating a large fee variation, if I was to say we don't do any rebuilding of assurance work, as I sit here today, there's nothing that is jumping out to me to say you're going to have a very large fee variation. However, the rebuild and assurance work will definitely be subject to a fee variation. But just to give some assurances again, that is an area which every council in the country, where they've had periods of disclaimed audits, will have fee variations, and the PSAA do look at those fee variations to provide sort of a level of reasonableness, that not everybody, not charging a fortune and not sort of doing different levels of work, for example. So the difference from last year's, so the 86 to the 158, the 86 is a reflection of the fact that last year you didn't get any audit work completed, you only had planning work completed. So the scale fee for last year was 143,000, as it's noted in my report there. What essentially KPMG did last year was say, well, we didn't do a full audit, so we will reduce that underlying scale fee to the 86, and then there was some additional fee variations for things such as the change in accounting standards and various other delays which did incur on the audit, as I understand, last year. So your baseline fee between 23-24 and 24-25 is consistent, but yes, there has been a shift from your 22-23 audit fee, but that is because you are then under a new PSAA contract, so the national contract appointment changed, and therefore the fees nationally increased. I think that's probably where I'll pause. If that's okay.
That's fine. Just a quick question before I go to members. You referenced the LARIG's guidance regarding the timeline, I think it was the delivery, and you said you didn't think it accorded with that guidance. Can you specifically remember which part of the guidance it is, and if you could tell members, because I think some of us maybe don't necessarily share that view that you have on that one, but I think members would be interested if you could actually just qualify that statement for us, please.
It's LARIG 05. I can't give you the exact paragraph number off the top of my head. I'd have to have a look at it, but it's around essentially continuing to deliver as much work as you can up to the backstop. So I can certainly share that paragraph with you once I've found it.
Would members be happy with that? Because I do think we need to understand that, because I certainly, thank you. Okay, members, I'm going to open it up to you first, but obviously I will have some questions following you. Councillor Morgan, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My first thought is that I should have gone into accountancy and not the law by looking at the size of those fees. But through you, if I could,
Yep.
To the lady from KPMG, on page 5, it says internal audit, and you say we will review the reporting prepared by internal audit. However, we do not plan to place any reliance on said work. I'm, as you know, new to this, but I just find that a strange comment to make. Could you perhaps enlarge upon it?
Yep, certainly. So to be able to rely on internal audit, we actually have to do a significant amount of work, actually, in terms of re-performing testing that internal audit had done, doing a number of checks to say that we're comfortable with internal audit. And it's actually something that across the sector isn't commonly done, and actually not just local government, across sort of the audit practice now, because of the auditing standards requirement in terms of that are placed on us if we wanted to rely on internal audit. But what we do is a number of things with internal audit. So it's not to say we don't take any value from the work that internal audit does. It certainly directs us in terms of our risk assessment. So, for example, if internal audit had done a report which said their payroll controls are shocking, for example, that would drive me to say, well, actually, I need to revisit my own sort of risk assessment over the work I'm going to do around payroll. I need to adapt a different approach. The other area where internal audit work is really valuable to us is in relation to value for money. So where we do take sort of that work and really do look at it and consider it in a sort of more assurance-based way is around value for money. So again, if there were reports. So if there was waivers or procurement, for example, or risk register reports where we were seeing that there were significant findings coming out, or equally very positive findings, that again feeds into our value for money risk assessment. So I wouldn't then be necessarily going and doing a lot of work around your risk assessment, your risk appetite process, if internal audit had given you sort of a glowing report, for example. So it's not to say we ignore it, it's just to say in order for us to place reliance on it, it would be putting a lot of work involved from our perspective, and ultimately I don't think that would give you any value versus the time it would take me to go and do a sort of a control sample myself versus the time it would take me to do the reliance on internal work myself.
Could I, just if I may, another on page 6 in significant risks rather, you're saying valuation of land and buildings. Sort of a comment generally, are we satisfied from the officer's point of view that we actually have a definitive and comprehensive list of land and buildings, and a schedule is exactly what it is that we own?
Is that Ms Green, or is that you, Paul?
Either. I can do it.
Yeah, Paul, please, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, we are comfortable with that. We've just been through a process as well over the past year of updating that list of all of our assets and property as well. So yes, we have a defined list there. I didn't know if Ms Green wanted to add anything.
Ms Green, would you like to add anything, please?
No, I think just to confirm that we absolutely have been through a very rigorous process of pulling together all of our assets list, and we've only recently had a further audit on that, which is further down the agenda, so hopefully that will give members some reassurance.
I think members, for those who wasn't on the committee, I can't remember what year it was, this was raised before, wasn't it? I can't remember if it was external or internal auditors, I can't remember. And our audit, I think it was when Chris Leslie was still here, and it was raised as a concern, which is why one of our audits was late. Paul, do you remember? One of our audits was late because we had to do a lot more work behind the scenes because it wasn't acceptable at the time. It was just after COVID, I think.
Yes, Chair, that was to do with evaluations and the methodology, and I think there were changes to the standards as well that came in around that time.
So members, I think I can reassure you that a lot of work has been done from years past to now where we are. I'm just going to go to Ben, and then Una, I'll come into you. Just turn your mic off 1 second, and then I can thank you. Ben?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points I think it's probably worth drawing out around Councillor's question on the extent to which external audit place reliance on the work of internal audit, and Emma has already given a very clear answer on that. I think it's probably fair to say that in the last 5 to 10 years there's been quite a shift in some of the work that's been undertaken on the part of external audit. It's just part of the wider shift that we've seen. There is less reliance being placed on the work of internal audit in the way that perhaps the councillor was expecting. There's also a greater level of detailed work on the specifics of individual transactions backwards and forwards. So, for example, taking not just the information out of the council's own financial systems, but also matching those back to the financial systems that they go through on their way from us or to us. So the NatWest account, which is our side, and there can be quite a lot of information that the external audit use through that process. It's quite time consuming on both sides dealing with that. There's also an awful lot of work around what's regarded as third-party estimates. So where there are estimates, for example, on the part of the actuary around the liability and benefit associated with the pension fund, or by the valuer around the property, plant and equipment, the assets, the land and buildings that the council hold, those details can be worked through in a very, very detailed way. And we've seen an awful lot of that in recent years in local government. So I think it's worth pointing out, yes, this council has a completely functional asset register, which, so far as we are concerned, lists out everything in its entirety. However, the translation of those land and buildings assets into a value to be included within the accounts is a complex process involving the use of quite complicated valuation processes, checking things like gross internal areas are recorded and valued appropriately, identifying the relative increase or decrease in the value within the market, identifying things like the depreciation on the properties. There's an awful lot of financial transactions in the background, none of which really mean anything until we decide to sell something. So it's quite a complex process. It's quite difficult on both sides because of the rules that we need to work within. I'm sometimes left a bit confused as to exactly what the benefit is for a reader of the accounts, but that's perhaps beside the point. I hope that's helpful.
No, thank you. Councillor Siddle-Norman.
Thank you. I'm sorry I always go back to what my experience before. In 2005, the asset list that we got to the full council, I queried the fact that in fact quite a number of things on there that Maldon District Council didn't own. They were quite upset to think that I should think it was wrong. And we have since found out that it was wrong. The allotments was on there, which I queried. Parts of Burnham on Crouch's towns properties were on there, such as the council offices at the time and the War Memorial. At what stage did this council, have you got that information, do we make sure that in fact that everything on our assets that we do actually own, please?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think because some things can be, I think I actually had a conversation with an officer last year about something they said Maldon owned it and they didn't, Burnham owned it. So can we be reassured that has actually happened, Ms Green? So we have checked the assets that you do, as in the council, do own them and they don't belong to some parish elsewhere, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As part of our review of our assets last year, we did exactly that to check the ownership. We actually visited each of the assets, took photographs, took a full inventory. So yes, that piece of work has been done. There are some assets which we do know historically perhaps weren't registered. And I think we've had a few queries, but what we do now is that asset register, we are as far as we can be 100% satisfied that it is accurate, and it is reported through to our Strategic Assets Working Group, who get a report on all of our properties and assets, and we are going through a process of reviewing those, prioritising them in terms of whether they're assets that we will be making improvements to, assets that we might want to consider disposal of. So there is a whole process around that which members are engaged with.
Okay. I think it's quite a good point though, Councillor Siddle-Norman's raised. So would that information be on the website at all? So if the parish or town council wants to check that their assets, Maldon's assets are not their town parish assets, or is it a confidential document? I wouldn't assume it's confidential. The valuations possibly, but not the asset.
It's not something that's put on the website, and it's probably something. It is certainly not confidential, and we'd be very happy to, if there are any queries, to share that.
Yeah.
I guess the only thing for us is that the way in which we hold the records may be slightly different. So if there is a property and it's broken down into several different parts, we might hold that in 3 different sort of records. Okay. So it might not necessarily exactly relate to perhaps what somebody would expect, but we're very happy to deal with any inquiries.
I think we're okay, because I think we would actually ask ourselves as councillors, but it is worth knowing if anybody's watching this and they've got any queries. Ben.
Thank you. Just one point to add to that is that obviously we have financial values associated with that asset register. However, that's most usually the valuation in the existing use, and the valuation on the open market could be very, very different, or the valuation for disposal very, very different again. Yeah. To calculate all of those different values, we probably need valuers, and that would cost quite a lot. So it might be worthwhile. I can pick up with Sue Green around exactly what we could publish. I think publishing something is entirely possible, but it might be a listing rather than listing plus valuation or something similar.
Yeah. Can I just say to gentlemen, if you want to take your jackets off, please take them off, because you're all starting to go quite red in the face, but honestly, I'm more than happy if you want to take your jackets off. Okay. Councillor Neil and then Councillor Driver. Oh, sorry, Councillor Norman, Cyril Norman. Yep.
We've had a lot of problems in Burnham for the fact that the town council and also Maldon District Council have been asked whether we own our Riverside Park and also the beaches along there, and I'm wondering if anything has been done about that. And in fact, if we do own it, is that on our asset list?
I think we've established that you can actually put a fresh serve ticket in, or we can take it away and get it answered for you, Councillor Cyril Norman. Okay, Councillor Neil, would you like to speak, and then Councillor Driver?
Yeah, I've kind of got a two-pronged question, really, so it's going to be split between yourself, Mr. J, and yourself. Obviously, cost is always an issue. It concerns me looking at 3.4.6, the table there, that we've gone from 2022-23 is £87,000, and then 23-24 is near enough £100,000 extra. And obviously 24-25 is a little bit less than last year. Obviously, Mr. J, you said there could be a potential of it being up to 250,000. So if there's some clarity on what that extra £100,000 could be, I'd like that as well. And then just onto the PSAA item that you mentioned earlier, obviously the set fees that are there. Obviously they were set for 24-25, and they do that on 4 different elements just for everybody's information. So obviously they use last year's 23-24 fees plus the significant charges for audit requirements for ISA 315 and 240. That's based on the type of organisation, then obviously there's adjustments for specific bodies, and then the lovely joy of inflation, which was set at 3.5. So for district councils, the Part B, which was the ISA 315 and ISA 240, is £9,410 for district councils. So you were saying there was quite a big fee as part of that cost. Can you just explain to me what that is? I'm just concerned on costs. It's how that works. Thank you.
So just to clarify, of the 9,500, is that what you're asking, or the total 158?
All of it.
All of it. Yeah. So, so as I say, I don't set the fee, so that is the fee. So to give you some context, so in terms of audit fees more generally, I think is probably the way to start as to why you've seen that increase from the 22 year. Over the period of the previous PSAA contract, the world of audit changed significantly. Fundamentally, it's it's a different world. So if you were delivering audit 10 years ago, how we deliver an audit now is vastly different. And that has come through significant changes in our regulators, so what the FRC expects us to be able to deliver. And therefore, just the general time to deliver an audit is significantly higher than what it ever was. The level of work that we have to do, the work that we have to do in terms of IT, for example, obviously, 20 years ago, we didn't look at IT. So that jumping cost that you're seeing from the old PSAA contract to the new one is essentially, I think as Ben said, a catch-up. So on that previous contract, those sort of incremental changes in terms of audit approach were never really adjusted for. So what you saw when the PSAA went out to recontract was that everybody said, well, actually, this is how much it now costs to deliver an audit. So across any audit in any sector, audit fees have significantly increased on a percentage basis that you are seeing there, if not higher in other industries. So that is just the nature of audit now. It is a professional service. It is one that is hugely important in terms of assurances given to stakeholders, and therefore, we need to make sure we are able to do the work that needs to be done, and therefore fees reflect that work. The change in ISA 315, so that shift, that was a fee variation last year, but is now baked into that scale fee, is a change in auditing standards. So what happened it actually happened a couple of years ago, but because of the disclaimers, it sort of only really hit you for last year is a change to how we are required to do risk assessment. So essentially the work that we now have to do around audit risk assessments to really understand where audit risk lies is much broader. So we, instead of saying we just think there's a risk around expenditure, it's around the work that we have to do now to say actually what part of expenditure is that risk, and the work that we have to do to really identify where that specific risk lies, and also put a significant emphasis in terms of IT. So we now have to do much greater work around IT as required by the auditing standards to make sure that we've really understood sort of the work that the authority does around cyber. We have to look at obviously your multiple different systems, and again the documentation requirements of all of that has just shifted. And again that is not something that us at KPMG have said that we want to do. That is an auditing standard requirement that any firm is required to do, and therefore that is why there has been that sort of baseline fee increase across all local government bodies as part of that contract.
Okay, Councillor Driver, please.
Thank you, Chair. Two observations, really. First, as far as the strategic assets register is concerned, over the last few years, the members have been pushing hard to try and make sure that that register is accurate, and that is now coming through to the Strategic Assets Working Group. And so we're in a much better place now than I think we have been, in fact. I think there's a lot more confidence in that register, which is very positive. So that's an observation from my point of view. The second, and I guess this is a question to Mr. J, but it does relate to Ms. Larkin's comments, and that is, not being an expert, but it's picking up the same comment in one sense that Councillor Neil has made, that jump does seem huge. And I accept the context has changed, but I guess I'm looking for some reassurance that that's reasonable given the context within which auditing firms are operating, and that actually, the wool is not being pulled over our eyes. As a non-expert, that's what I'm looking for, some reassurance, if that is possible.
Happy to respond to that. So to pick up Councillor Neil's previous question, and also Councillor Driver's question around that, I think the question around the KPMG advertised statutory audit fee at 158,000, and I was suggesting it could well be considerably higher than that. That's not based on any particular science other than gut feel. This is how the numbers appear to be behaving at the present time. It's what I've seen in recent years. The fact that the rebuilding of assurance work is likely to, I understand, to be outside of the 158,000. I can't see that being an easy or straightforward process. So my guess is that it's going to be off that order. We won't know until the KPMG team have concluded their work, and then the KPMG team have reported inwardly upwards within KPMG. That's then negotiated and agreed with PSAA. It's then signed off, and then we will be advised of it as a council that this is the fee which will be charged to us. It's very difficult for me to find a detailed breakdown of exactly how that's comprised. It's just one of those things, unfortunately, which perhaps leads then to a response to Councillor Driver. The question, as I understood it, was kind of what assurance can we get that we are getting, if you like, value for money for the increase in the fee. It's incredibly difficult to understand, as I've just explained, exactly the composition of that fee. It's not as if you're going to ask for a quote for a new kitchen and it's all itemised. It doesn't work that way. It's not a one-to-one relationship between ourselves and KPMG. It's negotiated through these national contracts which are held by PSAA. In that context, I think the best that we can offer as officers, and that we can officers can suggest to members that members ask is that we are as transparent as possible between ourselves and KPMG over what it is that KPMG have done, and therefore the fee which is then being charged on the back of that. I think part of my role over the coming months will be to work with Emma to ensure that there is as transparent an account given as possible in terms of the work that is being done by the KPMG team and the assurances that are therefore being provided for the council. I can't do an awful lot more than that, in all honesty. I hope that clarifies, Chair, and Councillor Driver, Councillor Neal.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
Thank you. If I could just start by thanking Ben and Emma for what they've said, but I am struggling quite a lot in terms of a number of the issues that are involved, and I do have quite a strong background in audit. I mean, I've chaired numerous national audit committees and numerous international audit committees, and I understand the complexity, I understand the difficulty completely. But the reasons given for what I view as a very poor service to the council have been difficulties recruiting staff, legislative and regulatory changes, and COVID. Now, I think that applied not only to councils, but to lots of organisations. And I'd like to know how many of the KPMG listed clients suffered the delays that Maldon District Council did. Because I suspect they didn't. I suspect they were serviced, and that just leads me to the conclusion that perhaps we're not being given the right level of respect by KPMG. Added to that, on the value for money, in looking at the plan, I was expecting to see a detailed budget in hours and costs, because there's nothing in there on charge-out rates. And this is a quasi-inflammatory comment, but when you have a firm where the average partner is taking home £648,000, for them to charge £86,000 for not doing the job, I find astonishing. I just, I'm quite appalled by the approach on that, because anything else, and I accept entirely, Chair, that it's not like a kitchen or whatever, but you've quoted and you've not done the job. I would expect for there to be some recognition of that and the difficulties that has given us in terms of what I don't like calling them, but our customers and the organisations we deal with. We're still in an environment where people look at audited accounts. And if we're saying, well, ours are totally disclaimed, why do we bother with them at all? And I'm not happy on the disclaimers, by the way, because I think the going concern disclaimer has no legs in it whatsoever. Going concern means you can't pay your bills or your debts as and well as they fall due. It's a 12-month window. We've got an organisation here with, £53 million worth of reserves. We're saying they're going bust. I'm sorry if it's a bit heavy, but as I say, I'm very interested on the approach with your other listed clients. I'm very interested in the number of hours, on what the charge-out rates are, and whether or not you can seriously sleep at night with the £86,000 for not doing your job.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith's our independent person, and we do value his opinion, and maybe that delivery's come across as a little bit bold. I've got some similar questions, but most probably worded slightly nicely. So I'm more than happy if you want to address those, or if you'd like me just to tie them into my questions.
Happy to address that now.
Thank you.
So I think very important to note, KPMG were not involved in any way in the local government audit market until 23-24. So in terms of the delays that have happened to the sector, KPMG had no impact in that. So we were not, we had no resourcing issues because we were not resourcing any local government market. So when we came back into the market, it was a very conscious decision that we wanted to come back into the local government market to support the recovery of local government audit. So I won't comment on impact on listed entities in terms of that period, because actually it's not a comparable point, because we were not servicing local government markets in that point. But what I will say is that within our public sector space, our national work in the NHS space, we have absolutely outstanding record in terms of being able to deliver our audits on time. So when we came back into the audit market to deliver local government audits, we did significant work to make sure that we had the right level of resource to deliver our audits, which is why you have an audit plan which sets out very clearly a route to recovery for Maldon. I'm very committed to making sure that we get our audits delivered. I'm already doing work that was more done than last year. Now, last year I wasn't involved in Maldon District Council, and neither was Ben. There was a number of reasons why you got a disclaimed audit opinion last year, but very committed to making sure that that doesn't happen in terms of the level of non-audit work that was delivered. We are already sampling, which didn't even happen last year. So we are very much here to support local government audits being returned back to a position, but it will take time because obviously there are a number of years of disclaimed audits. So that is my position. In terms of a detailed sort of hours breakdown, that is not something we would traditionally give. And again, in terms of the reflection on the audit fee, that is not an audit fee that KPMG set. That is an audit fee that has been set by the PSAA. We have not had any influence over that fee. They are the rates which are agreed nationally. So, I'm comfortable with the fee that the PSAA, as in the public body which has determined audit fees for all local government bodies, has set that reasonably on a basis which they are comfortable with. That is sort of my response.
Okay, thank you. Can I just have some clarity? You will excuse me because I do get things wrong. So I'm more than happy to correct it. You'll hear me say that quite often. Weren't KPMG our external auditors last year?
We were.
So what you've just said, you maybe weren't here and dealing with the account, but KPMG were. So I think members just need to understand that you were, not you personally, and it should never be down to a person. A company is not successful because of one person. In my view, it's about a team. So I just wanted members to be assured it was KPMG who did them last year, and we did get the disclaimed audit, I think is my understanding. So what I would like to actually ask, and it's covering some of what members have already said, Emma, and I think I raised some of this in the pre-agenda meet, so it won't come as a total shock to you. I think members are really trying to ask about how can we accept that you don't set the fees, but how can you justify what level of work are you going to be delivering that then results in a late submission to this council because you're pushing it back to February before you bring it to us to agree and accept. I don't use the proper lingo because I'm not an accountant, because that's what bothers me. We have previously delivered to this committee on time. Now, I raised that to you on the pre-agenda meet. I still haven't seen anything that convinces me that you've said you're going to do the additional assurances to before you present to February's committee meeting next year. But can you reassure me and the members in this room on this committee and the members outside, the 31 of the members in total that we have, that you are going to deliver and we are going to get a proper assured audit? Because for over £200,000 of taxpayers' money, one would hope that we're actually on course to deliver that. And please, if you think that's an unfair assumption, then I don't mind being corrected. But that is what my understanding is, and I think that's what members would be interested to hear, and maybe some officers. Ben, did you want to step in and let Emma have a breath, or what? Go on, Emma. Thank you.
So, yes, we were auditors last year. I think it is important to remember that last year you had multiple audits being caught up. So I won't comment on the reasons, but there were, as I understand it, various challenges last year. And I think we do need to focus on this year, where we have a very clear route to getting us back into a healthier position. In terms of delivery on time, the backstop date at the end of February is the statutory deadline for audited accounts for this year. So you will have accounts delivered on time. You will still have a disclaimer because we won't be able to complete all of the work around the rebuilding of assurance as is set out in the FRC guidance, but I'm going to start. And also you will have, so all of those risks I set out at the beginning, so all of those areas, so valuation of your assets, your pension liabilities, looking at your journal controls, all of that work that you have had no assurance from an external auditor for a number of years now, we will do the work over. We have already started. So I think it's really just remembering that we're on a journey here to rebuild something which takes time, and you are not alone. This is a national position, and I know that doesn't necessarily help, but what I'm saying is that the sort of the issues that we are facing here are what we are seeing across the sector, across firms, and we have to work collectively to bring us back to a position of assurance. And it does take time. What I am saying to you is that my ambition, as set out in my plan, is that we will complete the vast majority of our audit work on the 24-25 in-year balances sort of by the sort of an end of November, and I will bring you a draft report which tells you where we've got to at that point in time. We will then use the time where we have, you know, as much as we are able to start rebuilding the balances as we are able to, and then we will report by the statutory deadline at the end of February. That statutory deadline starts to come forward over the next few years to get you back to a sort of November statutory deadline to what you were committed to. But we are not delivering the audit to, you know, time. We are, and we have started work now. So absolutely, it's brilliant that the accounts are here today. It's brilliant that they were published on time. It's enabled us to start work. And I think we just, you know, I really do recognise that it's been a difficult period. But I suppose if, you know, I need you to sort of let me start doing the work and start to deliver, because, you know, it's been rubbish. I fully accept that. But, you know, Ben and I are very committed to getting things working again, and they already are. So, you know, I think that's all I can really say.
Absolutely, Emma, you've done very, very well. Thank you for your first meeting. I'd like to thank you. I'm going to go to Ben, and then I'm going to go to the recommendations. And thank you, Emma. You've done very, very well indeed. Thank you. Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Can I start by saying it's always really great to work with a very engaged audit committee, because it becomes a lot easier to do my own job, even though it's challenging. But working with engaged councillors, an engaged chair around these issues is great. Working with a committed external auditor is also helpful. There are a lot of issues here. We've talked through some of them. If I could perhaps frame it in terms of, I don't think we're going to solve much of it right here, right now. But perhaps, Chair, what I could suggest is that it might be worth considering how it might be possible to invite Emma back more frequently to audit committee meetings. Just looking at the forward calendar, there's a meeting in September, again in November, again in January, and again in March. In between times, it might be sensible to have some kind of offline set of discussions through which some of these issues can be discussed in more detail by members. Officers can provide more detailed answers, working within those kind of more informal contexts, and we can invite the internal auditors and perhaps the external auditors and perhaps the internal auditors along as well, so that we can have a more rounded conversation trying to understand what the issues are and how best to make the most of the situation, which isn't ideal, but it's the situation that we find ourselves in. So perhaps, Chair, if I can suggest we park some of the conversation but take it offline and continue it, that would be brilliant.
Yeah, that's fine, because Emma did kindly, and it says on page 29 that they have assured us that they will attend biannual meetings with the chair of this committee as well. So Emma did say that members, and I'd like to reassure you, I took that offer up, so we will be meeting with them on a regular basis. You can rest assured. I'm going to move this on, but I'm going to ask the officers sitting near me if they've got any questions finally for you, Emma. Is that okay? Because I haven't gone. Mr. Dodson, do you have anything you'd like to raise?
Not particularly, Chair. I think, you know, it's disappointing. It's probably more of a statement. I think it's very disappointing where we find ourselves in terms of the failure of the audit sector, not KPMG, but the position that got us into over the last few years, not just at Maldon, but across the whole of the local authority system. With I think it was down to 1% of accounts were fully signed off. And it now feels slightly unfair that we're having to pay
for it
to recover the situation. But I know all of the comments and all of the explanation that's been given through that. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Doug.
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat what other people have said. I want to thank Emma for her responses and reassurances of the work that KPMG are going to do with Maldon. I appreciate the additional engagement that we're going to have with Emma and her team. We just really want to move this forward. I think, as Ben has said, the engagement of audit committee members is encouraging for everybody, but we do want to see results, and we all want to work together to get positive results. So I think it's very much around, we voiced our concerns here around cost, around timelines, and around where we want to be. I think together we just need to work together to quickly get us back to normality of what normality is around accounts and audit. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Chair. Just to settle people's nerves on costings and Councillor Driver's issues on costings, I have just been cheeky and looked up the Auditors Directory website and the fees about, and we are fairly lower on the scale.
Don't say
compared to other areas.
Don't say that.
It's a happy medium, and we're in line. We're in line with other areas that are of a similar size. Is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah,
so.
thank you, Councillor Neil. Miss Green, would you like to raise anything? Because you sit very patiently at these committee meetings. Have you got any areas of concern? No? Okay. Well, I'd like to actually thank you, Emma. I'm going to go to the recommendations. I think that's an excellent debate, members. I think everybody's engaged very, very well, so I'd like to thank you. So the recommendations are, I'm going to take them all at once. Little one, that members consider the draft KPMG external audit plan and strategy for the year ending the 31st of March 2025, Appendix 1, and provide comments on it. Little 2, that members discuss the context of the performance framework for external audit. Little 3, that members consider the compensating controls in place to provide assurance for financial reporting in lieu of a robust external audit approach. And 4, that members consider the evidence presented in the report, including the context of the current plan from the external auditor for the audit of the 24-25 accounts, its sufficiency and robustness, the pressures cited by external auditors compared to those experienced in local government finance teams, the rationale provided by KPMG for their proposed timetable to February 26, given the clear guidance issued by the National Audit Office. I so propose. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Swindle, please. Tara. Members, can we agree by assent?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Thank you very much. Right, moving on to agenda item 8. Bear with me. This is found on pages, thank you, 57, 58, and then it goes, yeah, there we go. Bear with me, members. And then it's going to be Aaron is sitting at the end. Aaron, do you want to deliver the report, and then I'll pass the recommendations. Members, we'll do this en masse, I think. I don't think we need to do these individually. I think it's pretty straightforward. So, Aaron, you've been very patient and very quiet, so if you'd like to stand in the spotlight.
Everyone's warmed up now, aren't
they? They are. Emma was the brilliant warmer, actually. She's fantastic.
So, Chair, taking your advice of taking each report, I'll quickly go through and do a brief intro and highlight the key elements to each of the reports. So our first one is agenda item 8A, pages 59 to 66, which is our progress report. This covers the completion of the 24-25 internal audit plan and obviously progress and how we've commenced on the 25-26 internal audit plan. So the final two reviews, which are later on in our pack on asset management and main financial systems, are now complete, which also means that I can bring the head of internal audit opinion, which is another report that we'll cover shortly. In relation to 25-26, two reviews are in progress, but actually since the collation of this report, the review in relation to waste and recycling is now complete and a draft report has been issued. So it's pleasing to see the engagement that we're turning the work around relatively quickly in line with our timetable as well. And we've also scoped 2 further reviews relating to safeguarding and corporate governance that has gone out to management for agreement. That gives me again confidence that for the 25-26 internal audit plan we'll have a trajectory of work throughout the year, reports to these committee meetings on an ongoing basis, so we can obviously inform our annual reporting cycle this time next year. So that was all I was going to say on the progress report. The second report we got is a short update on our follow-up of previously raised internal audit recommendations. That is agenda item 8B, pages 67 to 73. It is short because there was only one recommendation due for follow-up, and I'm pleased to say that that was completed. So that means that all recommendations that have fallen due in previous years and up to date have been completed by the council with evidence received to confirm that. So the remaining recommendations are not yet due, but obviously at future committee meetings we'll be reporting when they fall due. So moving on to our third report, which is on asset management, pages 75 to 94. Again, this was produced to provide assurance how the council maintains a full and complete asset register. Based on earlier conversation, I would advise that obviously it's about the controls in place and not necessarily looking at the financial value, obviously with our different remit and what we're looking at. But actually it was a positive review that resulted in a moderate assurance opinion over design and then a substantial opinion over the operation of the controls that are in place. We raised 1 medium and 3 low priority recommendations, with the medium rec more relating to supporting practices and principles of implementing the asset management strategy, whereas the 3 low recommendations were more minor in terms of tweaks that obviously do not pose a significant risk to that control environment. Our fourth report is on the main financial systems. Again, agenda item 8D, pages 95 to 109. And this review had kind of a twofold coverage. So we always do a cyclical coverage on the control account reconciliations and journals, and then the key IT access controls. And then what we do is then we complement it with a specific deep dive into an area within the financial remit. And this year it was on the key treasury management controls. As a result of our work, it's produced a moderate assurance opinion over both the design and operational effectiveness of controls. We did identify a number of areas of good practice, as you would expect for an area that's probably audited quite frequently and is well controlled, but we have obviously identified a couple of findings there to improve going forward, specifically relating to evidencing the user access system review for the finance system, and obviously then as well as evidencing the preparer and reviewer to demonstrate segregation of duties on the control account recs. I think what's important there is the word evidencing, so we're not suggesting it's not happening, it's just having that audit trail present. And then the final report is the annual report and my head of internal audit opinion for the financial year 24-25. So this is a summary of all the work we've completed for the year, taking into account those 2 final reviews as well. I won't go through obviously the detail of all of the conclusions because this committee has seen the individual reports, so they should look familiar. We completed a total of 9 reviews, and what I would say is the opinions have generated very similar outcomes to that of what we've seen in previous years. There were a couple of limited assurance opinions for 2 reviews, but I just remind the committee that our audit is risk focused and we are directed to some areas of risk or concern that may need improving, and I think in those scenarios we debated quite heavily in relation to those subjects at this committee, and the outcomes are positive and helping the council take forward improvements and enhancements in the control environment. Furthermore, what we look at is the implementation of previously raised internal audit recs. So obviously at the earlier report I've confirmed that management have taken action on all the recs that have fallen due, and I think that's a good barometer of kind of compliance health in the organisation as well when it comes to our internal audit recs. So that's taken into account, and what that results in is an overall assurance opinion for the year of moderate, which I often have to tell committees that is a good result. So it's very unlikely that you would be in substantial unless you had green across. And as I just said, we are focused on the risk area, so that is also uncommon of getting numerous substantial opinions. And actually, even though there were a couple of areas of limited assurance, they weren't systemic thematic issues that would then drive an overall limited assurance opinion. So that was all I was going to say on those reports. I'm conscious I've whittled through them quite quickly, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, I'd like to apologise to Andrew. You're online, darling, and I never introduced you. I'm so sorry. Is your car, are you okay now? Is your car back working?
No, it's not at the moment, but it's going to get fixed tomorrow. So.
Oh, well, welcome. And I'm sorry I didn't introduce you when you popped on the screen. Okay, members, do we have any questions? Councillor Morgan, please.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. Does the recent leisure contract, is that something that you have had to or been able to look at as part of your internal audit?
It's not an area that's on our plan at the moment, but it's obviously, if it's an area of emerging risk or concern within the council, we always meet with management. We meet regularly with Mr. J as well to kind of ensure that our work is focused on the right areas of risk. So I will be open and say, no, it's not, because the plan was agreed a number of months ago. So if it's an emerging risk now, it may be something that we take offline and discuss how we can help the council going forward.
I think that's a very good question, and I think we don't generally say what risk we want to go on here. It's usually done by officers, which I've raised a concern before, because I think it sometimes should be brought from members. But I think, Mr. J, if you could actually make a note of that, because I do think this committee needs to keep a secure watch and tight rein on that contract going forward. So thank you very much. Good question. Any further questions? I'd just like to say on page, there's a couple of comments, page 87, the management response, this was 2 reconciliations. The council has carefully considered this recommendation. However, it's decided to retain its annual reconciliation of the asset register to its ledger. This is because the asset base value, and I've just put why. Why did the management response not go with the recommendation from the internal auditor? So that's one question, page 87. And the next one is page 102, the management response to that. I've just put very good, so that's just really for noting. And the overall comment on page 130, from the chair's point of view, I've put well done. So if we could just have an answer to the page 87, why is the management chief finance officer not taken the recommendation from the auditors, please? Do you know?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. The rationale is that the valuation doesn't need to be maintained on a very regular basis, but it does need to be maintained no less than annually in order to properly inform the preparation of the accounts. It links back to the point I raised earlier, which is that the most important point is to make sure that the asset register is up to date in terms of the numbers and locations of properties and land and so forth. The valuation becomes quite complex and can be something that moves quite extensively through a period of time. Therefore, to avoid an unnecessary burden on officers, it's more efficient to focus the time on the annual reconciliation, which is what the reasoning I adopted around that.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. If there is a problem, I'm sure you'll raise it and bring it to us so it can be addressed. Thank you. Okay, moving on, members. The recommendations are that the committee considers, comments and approves the following. Little 1, progress report 24-25 and 25-26 at 8A. Little 2, follow up the recommendations report July 2025 at 8B. Little 3, asset management final report June 25 at 8C. Little 4, main financial systems 23-24 final report June 25 at 8D, and little 5, annual report and annual statement of assurance 24-25 at 8E. I so move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Neil. Members, can we agree by assent? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you, Tara. Right, moving on to agenda item 9. Now, I think, members, before I hand over to Mr. J, Ben, he very kindly did was it a training session or an information session regarding statements of accounts and everything? And I trust that you all attended. If not, you've watched it online. If not, can I actually ask that if you get a little bit of time, you do watch it, because he's done a very good presentation. The wording of the title of it isn't very good, because he says doing boring really well, which doesn't really inspire anybody to actually want to look at it. But I can reassure you it is well worth actually watching it. and trying to get the understanding. Any problems, go back to Ben if you don't. Okay, Ben, I'm going to move over to you and then I will put the recommendation. It's only a quick recommendation, members, but Ben, you don't need to go through the whole page of the accounts. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm disappointed that you don't enjoy that quote as much as I do, but there we go. Thank you, Chair. Just to take the committee through this agenda item 9, there's a cover report and obviously the many pages, I think it's 123 pages of the accounts. I don't propose to go through all of those. As the Chair has mentioned, there is a training session which was prepared and delivered just under a week ago. It is available on the member portal if you want to look it up. I think it's fair to say that the structure of the statement of accounts is highly prescriptive. There are many rules that KPMG colleagues need to work within. There are many rules that my team need to work within. They don't make it easy to read. So what I'll try to do is just go through the report, and then I think that the table at 3.5 hopefully will give us a quick indication of some of the key points from a financial perspective that I think the committee should be aware of. So just to take you through quickly, I think the most important point that I really want to raise, it's been touched on in the earlier part of the meeting this evening, but 3.1 and 3.2 of the report point out that not only did the team meet the deadline, the team actually prepared the accounts ahead of the deadline for this year. There is something important about the fact that if you cannot prepare your accounts in time, in a timely way, usually it's either the case that there is insufficient resource, so you haven't got the right number of bodies there to help do that work, or the council, the body, the organisation is not really in touch with its financial position. The fact that we were able to do it on time, in fact earlier than required, I think points to the fact that the team are very well in touch with what's happening in terms of the financial transactions of the council, which is a huge kind of vote of confidence. I can't take any credit for that position. I don't want to. That work was all undertaken before I arrived, so I've come in on the back of that. But I think it's real kind of credit to Ben Cookson, the previous 151, and also Tom Malloy as his deputy, and they've done a really great great piece of work with the team. So just that's the first point. I think in terms of the detail of what's within the accounts, very briefly, if you don't get a chance to read anything else in the 123 pages of the document, the narrative statement is quite helpful. I think there's a number of key points within that I draw out, and these are similar to the points I drew out in the training. It's worth noting that we have to prepare the financial accounts of the authority in line with the accounting regulations. They are different to the funding basis of the authority, which is largely through the raising and receipt of taxation through business rates and council tax. They're quite different things, and it's important to recognise the difference to that. That comes through very clearly in the way in which the reserves are prepared, which is around the usable and the unusable reserves. Usable reserves is basically cash in the bank. Unusable reserves is the other side of a number of accounting transactions that we're obliged to put through the authority. But just looking at some of these points in terms of the narrative statement items and page 132 of the agenda, I've noted around the point on the funding basis. I think the surplus of income over expenditure 2.9 million versus a deficit of 9.9 million in 23-24. This is because of the accounting basis. It's the accounting basis which is driving some of these changes. On the funding basis, there's a net contribution to reserves of 2.5 million, with some use of reserves being reported in 23-24. There's a reconciliation also back to the outturn report, which was taken by Strategy and Resources Committee in June. So the 853k surplus can be shown to be on the same basis as the accounts, and we can show that they are all coming from the same set of numbers. There's no difference there. The total revenue spending is reported. Total revenue spending of 33 million in the last financial year, 32 million with roundings in the previous year. What you can see is the revenue spending is quite stable from year to year. That reflects the fact that the business of the council really hasn't changed a great deal. I know that there's an awful lot of meetings and an awful lot of member and officer time taken up with making it, but actually it's quite stable overall. I think it's important to bear that in mind. The last point on page 132 around the pension fund net benefit and liability, this is an area of considerable debate, but at the end of the day, none of these assets and liabilities actually materialise until either an investment is sold or a member of the scheme, a deferred member of the scheme, becomes an active member of the scheme and starts receiving their pension. So all of this is to some extent estimates at this point, and they are subject to a great deal of volatility. What I would just take the committee through very briefly, comprehensive income and expenditure statement. What we can see there is that the cost of services has remained stable from year to year, but the costs outside of that, which include some of the investment returns from the cash available, also the valuation on the pension side, those are the accounting elements that we're obliged to bring in for the purposes of the accounts that don't reflect back in terms of the budgetary performance of the council. And I think it's really important to understand that. The movement in reserves, what we can see in looking at agenda page 133, and it's within the table movement in reserve statement, which is on page 22 of the accounts. That shows that at the end of 24-25, the total reserves is 53.7 million, of which 36.9 million, so the majority, is unusable. This is that term I used previously. There's no cash behind that. We can't use that to fund services. There is, however, 16.8 million of usable reserves. These are cash backed and can be used to fund service delivery. So some of that is linked to capital grants, for example, so they will be spent on capital works as those come forward. Some of it is part of the general unallocated reserve, the general fund balance. Alternatively, they are parts of the earmarked reserves where specific reserves have been allocated against particular objectives, things like transformation costs, for example. The balance sheet reflects again the total value and the net value of assets, the 53.7 million, which is also shown in the reserves. So the different statements tie together as should be apparent in that way. And the cash flow shows the changes in cash and cash equivalents during the year. Sometimes we hold cash within the bank. Sometimes we invest surplus cash where we can, and we can get a little bit of return based on that, but we do so very cautiously and having taken independent treasury management advice around that. But overall, there is a very slight decrease in cash and cash equivalents of only 100,000 through the course of the year. So overall, the cash that the council is able to access at any point in time is quite stable, and that reflects the overall stability of the organisation. In terms of the notes, there's a couple that I will point to as being quite useful in different ways. Notes 7B and 7C, which relate back to the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. 7C is particularly helpful because it shows the way costs are broken down, for example, between staff and other costs, or staff capital, third-party spending, those kinds of things. So that's quite useful from that perspective, a good reference point. And in terms of the movement in reserves statement, note 9, I think it's note 9A and note 9B, provide quite helpful breakdown of the way in which different reserves have been used or added to during the course of the year. There's an awful lot of detail within these. I've tried to summarise it within that table. Hopefully that will provide a quick way into the 123 pages of the formal statement, should you be inclined to read that. Alternatively, there is, of course, the member portal and the video that came through Teams, which you can also use. And I'm happy to take any questions on it, Chair. I hope that's a helpful trot through the report and the accounts.
Brilliant, thank you. I think it's very well received, and thank you for keeping it fairly succinct. Members, do we have any questions? Councillor Morgan, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can see no mention here, and probably I missed it, or whether it's not, of the dredging of the Hive Quay. Is this because it's not going to happen, has happened, will not happen, or there is no provision for it?
I think the simple answer to that is that the work around how that will be delivered is for the future. The accounts for 24-25 specifically relate to the activities from April 24 to March 25, and it will follow. So there will be some planning of that, budgetary work, capital allocations, revenue allocations, etc., and it will then be reported, I expect, as part of the 25-26 accounts or thereafter.
So you're not making any earmarking any provisions for it as going forward?
Not at this stage, partly because the value of or the cost of the works is yet to be determined.
Thank you. It hasn't gone through council yet. There's no decision being made, so it wouldn't be on these accounts, Councillor Morgan. Mr. Smith.
Yes, it's not really a question, it's more an observation. I was absolutely delighted to see the accounts, and I think a phenomenal job has been done.
However...
I lack the nuanced delicacy of language that the chair has, but I just ended up with a couple of comments. Number one, I've always believed that organisations have to have a culture of celebration, and I thought the accounts did that. You've got a surplus, you've got good reserves. There's only two stings in the tail as far as I can see. One was the contingent liability, and I don't know what that is, and I don't know if that could be very damaging. And the other, and I know the auditors don't want to put in a draft report, but the comments that Emma made about hoping to end up with no disclaimers, I thought, well, whoopee-doo, what a transformation. Let's celebrate it, because there's some phenomenal stuff there. And I don't need 130 odd pages to do that. I just think a few headlines would be very, very helpful in terms of we made a surplus, our reserves are good, we're not a thorough, and everything's looking great, and the auditors are going to be phenomenal and make sure there are no disclaimers this time.
I think that's lovely, but that will come following this committee. We make the decisions, and then we can ask for the press releases, but take on board. We have to go through this committee to make those decisions, and then whatever needs to go to full council will go. But I think that's a great suggestion, and it would be nice that sometimes this committee gets recognised, Mr. Dodson, because we do a lot of hard work here over the years, haven't we? We've sat at this table for years, haven't we, discussing these things. No, I think the committee is going in the right direction, and everybody else who's been on this committee for on and off for a few years. I think it's fantastic. So anyway, yes. So Emma,
sorry, I just
you're
want
not
to.
going to ask us a question, are you?
I'm not. But I did just want to clarify. You won't not have a disclaimer this year for 24. It's a journey, but you will obviously have had some work completed.
Yeah.
I thought the comments you made on it, Emma, were incredibly encouraging. Yeah. And I'm grateful for them.
Yeah. You can turn it off now, yeah. But we could have some nice comments in the audit, couldn't we? And we could fish those out when we want to do a press release. Yeah, we like to be positive here. Okay, members, so I'm going to move straight to the recommendation that members consider the 24-25 statement of accounts at Appendix 1. Well, I've certainly considered them, and I take on board Mr. Smith's comments. Does anybody want to say anything? No? Can we agree? I so propose. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Driver, can we agree by assent? Agreed. Brilliant, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 10. Before I move on to that, I just want to actually ask Mr. Dodson, Doug, I always forget your surname, Doug, if they want to raise anything before I actually move on to anything else. Is there any concerns, Paul? No? Doug?
No, thank you, Chair.
Ben, is there anything you want to add? Lovely. Well, thank you. So moving on, agenda item 10, any other items of business that the chairperson and committee decides are urgent? I have none. So members, an hour and a half exactly, it's 9 o'clock. Well done. Thank you for your participation. Thank you, everybody offline, Tara. And Andrew's gone to get his car. And thank you, everybody. Emma, well done. You've done very, very well. And Andrew's used to us by now. Thank you. Have a safe journey home, members. I close.